I've done presentations about ranked choice voting all over the country this year. And so I've done I was at CPAC in DC. We had a booth at CPAC, and we went to Florida, and I did a similar presentation in front of 5 secretaries of state, current secretaries of state, 51 in election integrity, executives, people that are in charge of various election integrity groups in various states. And Karina and I met through a Arizona RNC Twitter space, actually. So Twitter acts as a great place to learn about these conservative talking points. But the point that I'd like to draw out, that right off the bat, is that the Democrats are a primary, very, very important group of people to talk to about this. Because people assume that the Democrats are 100% behind ranked choice, they love ranked choice voting. The DC Democrats recently, this isn't even in my presentation because it's so new. It was, I believe it was August 31st or July 31st, I don't remember which date, but the DC Democrats sued DC, the city of DC, to block ranked choice voting from taking effect in DC. And so that's a recent thing. So no Democrat legislature here in Alaska or here in Hawaii would be aware that that happened, most likely. And so taking that information, they put out a 2-page paper about it too, about why they don't want it. And so, and the funny thing is, the same reasons why we don't want it are the same reasons why they don't want it. So if you look at the money, that's where it comes down to, right? So you mentioned that. And we'll cover a lot of that today, but well, specifically, there's 2 parts to my presentation. I'll try to get through as fast as I can. They're little, quick, short videos. And these videos can be shared anywhere online, YouTube, Twitter, and things like that. But the first part is about Alaska, about our experience in Alaska, and then we'll go into other places that have used ranked choice voting, including, we'll talk a little bit about DC as well. So first, I want to start off by saying why I'm here. Why did I get involved with trying to be against ranked choice voting? So last year during the election in 2022 in Alaska, I was working with a variety of political people, Sarah Palin being one of them, and see how things just progressed, and seeing how voters are very frustrated, so. For the very beginning, they had a real hard time understanding what was going on, how the system worked, when the results were going to be available. You'll learn in this presentation that Alaska was the last state in the country for election results. So one of the claims to fame about ranked choice voting is that it's faster than any other election method. It's faster than plurality. But the reality is it's not. It's actually, Alaska only has 200,000 voters. Why are we the last state in the country for our election results? It's crazy. And so you think that here in Hawaii, you guys have a lot more voters. So it's going to make it more complicated, more expensive. It's going to take longer. So all these things are facts. These are factual-based arguments that we base on. I've written a book about ranked choice voting. It's called Illusion of Choice. It's coming out. There's one more book about ranked choice coming out on the 19th, actually, not from me. And I want to read that one before putting my book out. So that one's actually another anti-ranked choice book, and I highly recommend people learning about this because it's not a new system. Most of the people I meet today, all over the United States, believe that ranked choice voting is a brand new thing. It's never been around, and it's exciting, and so they relabeled it. It used to be called STV, not RCV, and so they also have IRV, which stands for instant runoff voting. And so in Australia, it's called STV. In Canada, it's called STV. These systems have been around for 100 years. In the United States, we've been using a form of ranked choice voting in various cities across the country since the 1920s. And there's 85 places in the United States that have repealed ranked choice voting systems in some way or another. Again, they weren't called ranked choice at the time. That's a new term. And funny thing is, in Arizona, we learned recently because, I hope that my work actually helped fix this. But the ranked choice voting group that was doing a ballot initiative, I'll discuss how they get ranked choice, into these various states as well. But they're trying to do it the same way they did it in Alaska. And so what they do is they get lots of outside money. They come to the state. They hire out-of-state people to come fly to the state to do signature gathering. And then they do a citizens initiative. I know it's a great name. They call it citizens initiative, and citizens aren't even gathering the signatures. But the point is like, so when you go to Alaska, there's plenty of great Alaskans, and similar to Hawaii and many other places that are very busy, fishing and tourism, they aren't really into the political realm. They don't, they're not really paying that close attention. And so you run into this situation where people aren't really knowing exactly what's going on, what kind of vote, how are we supposed to vote on these bills, etc. And what I learned was that these pro-ranked choice groups are really good about creating things that sound great. They sound beautiful on paper. They're like, oh, it'll be better, it'll be cheaper, it'll be faster, it'll increase turnout, it'll be good for third parties. These are all claims that they make, and the facts are is that none of these are true. And so let's start off with just this book. Just the next little video is just going to describe what's going to be in the book. And then I'm going to talk about why I decided to. I actually wrote the repeal of ranked choice voting in Alaska. And I'm actively working on another repeal in Minnesota, at Minnetonka, Minnesota. And so there's about 50 places in the United States that use some form of ranked choice voting, either in the city elections or a local municipality or in the state. Alaska is the only state that uses it for all elections. And in regards to the state and federal, and so in Maine, they've had ranked choice for a period of time, but it is only limited to a certain number of elections there. Not all the elections use it. And a couple of things, the reason why, the Supreme Court of Maine determined that ranked choice voting was unconstitutional. And just today, the Massachusetts Attorney General also determined that ranked choice voting was unconstitutional. So I'm happy we are moving in the direction we are. I'm happy that the message is getting out there. And so in Arizona, when we were there, I found out that the ballot group that was going to promote ranked choice, they were going to spend $20 million just gathering signatures to get it on the ballot. And where do you think that $20 million comes from? Yeah, it comes from George Soros. It does, and this is facts. This is factual evidence. There's a group called Capital Research Group out of DC. They run a website called influencewatch.org. I highly recommend you using that, especially when you see groups like Common Cause and Fair Vote and these other organizations. If you see an organization you're not aware of and you've never heard of them before, go to influencewatch.org, type in their name, and then they normally will have done a lot of research in regards to where the money, who actually gives them money. And in that, you'll learn Fair Vote, who was one of the people that sponsored it here, is funded by both George Soros and his son, and their organization, Open Society Foundation. So it is a major concern when you have Europeans, specifically instituting very European-style election methods. Our ranked choice voting is a colonial UK voting method, and it is used in colonies of the UK. It's used in Ireland, it's used in UK, it's used in Canada and Australia, all colonies. So why are we pushing colonial voting methods on Americans? I mean, I feel like there's something to be called out there, right? And so going into the why I wrote the bill to repeal ranked choice voting in Alaska. My grandfather, last fall, who's been in Alaska for 30 years, ran a multi-million-dollar construction company in Alaska, a very smart guy. He's in his 80s and he's dealing with some cancer. And I, at the time, did not know he had cancer. And the voting took place, and my granddad calls me and he tells me he didn't know how to fill out his ballot. And so at that time, I knew there was something wrong. I didn't know what. I didn't know how serious it was. I'm not a political person. I'm not a senator. I'm not a House of Representative member. I'm just a business owner. And so my grandfather calling me and doing that, though, made me very, very suspicious. Made me concerned that there's a lot more people that were potentially hurt by the system that we don't even know. And I wanted to find out more. And when I did, I found out there was, I heard from people that were poll watchers and people that worked in the election system last year said that they believe that 10 or 15% of people filled out their ballots incorrectly, that they didn't know how to fill it out. They had a lot of questions, and none of this stuff ever came out. No one ever talked about it. The media, no one. And you wonder why. Why is this not discussed? And after a while, I realized that the state legislature, so in Alaska, you can repeal ranked choice through the legislature after 2 years. And so even though it's a citizen's initiative, the legislature could have repealed it already. Why didn't they? So it's a question, you know, so you start asking, and our legislature is mostly Republican, and our governor's Republican. So, you know, there's a power struggle here with people, the individual citizens, and the political people that are in charge of our states. And so we, as citizens, cannot determine or can't wait for those people to do everything for us. Sometimes we as citizens have to step up to the plate and get out and do it ourselves. And that's what I will encourage all of you to do. There's plenty of ways to get involved, and there's plenty of ways to be in regular communication with your legislators to make sure that they're aware of the facts behind certain things. And this one is a big one. So Fair Vote and these Common Cause people and all these people pushing ranked choice, yes, they make it sound great, but the facts are it's not.
Down button reverse.
Over ranked choice voting, illusion of choice, we will explore the realm of ranked choice voting, or RCV, and critically examine its claims, impact, and potential consequences in U.S. elections. Ranked choice voting, or RCV, is marketed as a better system, claiming to be cheaper, faster, and capable of increasing voter turnout. It also promises to benefit third-party candidates and voters. However, our extensive research and studies covering over a dozen cities and nearly 2 decades present a clear argument against ranked choice voting. Both Democrats and Republicans question the purpose and effectiveness of ranked choice voting. California Governor Gavin Newsom, former California Governor Jerry Brown, Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker, and former Nevada Governor Stephen Sisolak expressed concerns about voter confusion and the unfulfilled promise of greater democracy. Gavin Newsom went as far as to veto RCV from taking effect across California. U.S. Senator Tom Cotton labeled ranked choice voting as a scam to rig elections. Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy expressed his confusion about ranked choice voting. Someone can get the most votes and not win, said McCarthy. So if you come in third, you win. What? I got a lot of second votes. I got a lot of third vote. What does that mean? Highlighting the potential disenfranchisement of voters and distortion of election outcomes. In this book, we will delve into crucial topics such as election turnout, voter confusion, and RCV impacts on demographics and third parties. Our goal is to provide readers with a comprehensive understanding of the intricate complexities surrounding RCV and its potential effects on electoral outcomes. Informed citizens are essential for a robust republic, and it is our aim to equip you with the knowledge and tools necessary to make well-informed decisions. RCEA has actively engaged with the nationwide pro-ranked choice voting groups and their funders, participated in debates, and delivered presentations across 6+ states. Our research has been presented to state officials, including multiple state legislators and attorney generals, 5 secretaries of state, and 4 lieutenant governors in 2023 alone. We remain dedicated to the ongoing fight against ranked choice voting and invite you to join us in our mission to preserve the integrity and effectiveness of our electoral process. Please support our efforts against RCV by buying our book, watching our video.
And so we're talking about the truth and the facts behind ranked choice. I want to talk a little bit about Alaska, right? I said the first part of the presentation covers Alaska, and then the second part will cover some of the other places that have used ranked choice. But in this graph up here, this is done by a group called Unite America. Unite America is another, kind of like Common Cause or Fair Vote, another organization promoting ranked choice voting. And they claim that Alaska had the 48% turnout last year. That's what they claim. And they did some crazy math to come up with that. It was actually 44%. So like, when I'm talking about like literal liars and willing to tell anybody anything to get you to vote for it, they will. And this group is notorious for it. This is proof. There's nowhere anywhere online can you find that voter turnout was 48%. And if you look at you can't see it here, but at the bottom of that chart, they don't claim that Unite America made the chart. They don't say anywhere on the chart that they were responsible or they made changes to the math. It says, at the bottom it says source, Alaska Division of Elections. But there is not a single document on the Division of Elections that will give you that same number. This is what the Division of Elections says. 44.38%. You know why they want you to believe it's 48? Because that's the lowest percentage turnout in the history of the state of Alaska. In the entire history of our state, which is relatively new, we're a relatively new state, But in the long run, if you look at the ranked choice, the pro-ranked choice groups say it increases turnout. They say that is one of the biggest selling points to ranked choice voting is that it increases turnout. I heard that there was a mail vote here in Hawaii where they said that they were going to increase turnout as well, and that didn't work out either. Similar process, similar issue, lots of promises and not delivery. So yeah, this is a fun little thing to read. It just talks about beginning claims in California. And so in California, they use this, this is the reasons on why they pushed ranked choice voting. And there's a lot of people that were against it then. And this was the very first place in the US that used ranked choice voting recently. There were still other cities and people, but this is the biggest by far city that has used ranked choice voting and has used it for over 20 years now. So it's been in place there, and I'm sure many people are aware of San Francisco and how well they've been doing over the last 20 years. So does this play some role? Well, some of the people that live in Oakland and San Francisco that I'm in regular communication with believe it is a major influence. And when we get into Oakland here in a little bit, we'll talk about some of Oakland's a very unique place in that they keep track of the exhausted ballots, and they label them individually, and you can get access to that voter data, unlike every other place that uses ranked choice voting, even Alaska. So just a raise of hands, how many people in here are familiar with exhausted ballots? Do you know what? Okay, well, I'll explain that first. So exhausted ballots is when you vote for one person. So, in this, for instance, I'll use Alaska's election. Just hopefully people are familiar with Sarah Palin, right? And so in that race, there was 3 people, and let's say you just voted for the 3rd person, right? And you didn't vote for anyone else. You only ranked one person. And that person gets eliminated, okay? So in this circumstance, Nick Begich, who's a Republican, ran against Sarah Palin and ran against Mary Peltola. And Nick pulled some votes. He got some votes. Issue is not everyone ranked Nick and then ranked Sarah. And so because of that, a very large percentage of ballots were exhausted. So that means it was thrown out and not counted to the total. So Lisa Murkowski and Mary Peltola both claimed they got over 50% of the vote. And in Lisa's case, that was the first time. She was like, oh, this is the first time in history in my entire political career that I got over 50%. Well, if we look at the numbers and you put back in the exhausted ballots, she didn't get 50%. So when they claim a majority, that's the main objective, right? The ranked choice voting says, we get a majority. We get a majority. This is the way this is great. And you get the make sure that everyone that gets elected has a majority, right? Well, in San Francisco, they had in 2010, 2011, they had an election where there was 19 rounds of ranked choice voting tabulation. And at the end, the person that won claimed they got a majority. And I think most of us here would say that the majority should be 51% of the total votes, correct? 51% of total. Well, because of exhausted ballots, right? And remember, ranked choice claims they get a majority. That's their big claim to fame. Well, in that race, they got 21% of the vote, of the total vote, and they claimed they got 50% because they exhausted so many ballots and to get to that final number. And so with 21% of the vote, they claimed they got a majority. So, and it gets worse somehow. In Minnetonka, Minnesota, with exhausted ballots, out of 10,000 people, tiny little town, 50,000, there's only 10 to 12,000 voters. And in that election, nearly 1,600 people, 16% of the total ballots cast were exhausted. And that was in one election. So when she was talking about education and the concern, that's very much my concern as well. One, I think that it's very expensive. We'll talk about voter education and the expenses associated with it here shortly. But that's one major flaw with ranked choice, is because people don't understand how it works. They don't know that their ballots can be exhausted. And so in this Minnetonka tiny town, right, 16%. Okay, well, in New York, it should be way better, right? Everyone's a lot more smart in New York, right? Well, New York's the one that they claim the fame. They're like, oh, yeah, we did it in 2021 and in New York City. And they did it for the mayor election. That was Eric Adams' election in New York City. They had 15% ballots exhausted. And that was 150,000 ballots. So 150,000 New Yorkers' votes did not count to the total int. And so you talk about apathy and where we go when we have things like this happen. The primary this year for New York, using the same type of voting method, voting turnout was only 6%.
Wow. Jeez. Wow.
6%. And Fair Vote is claiming that it's great and they love it, and New York loves it. It's a great system. So here's a claim to fames. They claim it's better. They claim it's cheaper. They claim it's faster. They claim it increases turnout. They claim it gives an absolute majority. They claim it's good for third parties. They claim it's more civil. And they claim it reduces and eliminates spoiler candidates. This is what the ranked choice people claim nationally. And so one of those is really important is a couple of them actually, but the absolute majority one's a major piece. Absolute majority is a specific terminology that has to do with elections. And it means that you've got 51% of the total votes cast. If you do a ranked choice voting and it goes to and someone gets 50%, then yes, that's it. End of election. Then no ranked choice happens. But that doesn't happen. As far from what my research, very, very seldom. Susan Collins in Maine was one of the only people that I found that actually got the 50%. So she didn't actually have any ranked choice. There was no ranked choice tabulation that took place. But in the majority of the elections, they get below the 50% threshold. And so with that, if you exhaust any ballots whatsoever, you do not have an absolute majority because you have removed ballots from the total. And so you've manufactured a majority. You've created a majority, and then you're claiming that that majority is the majority of voters, when over here, at least in New York's circumstance, 150,000 people's votes didn't count at all. So you're talking about disenfranchisement. Think of you waking up in the morning, standing in line and voting, and then having your vote thrown out, and you not even knowing that it got thrown out. They don't notify you and tell you. They don't say, hey guys, just so you know your vote was tossed. No, they don't tell the errors that you made. They don't say, hey, you made mistakes. Well, let me break down this exhaustive ballots because it is incredibly important. So when you look at the numbers, it sounds like just a big number, 150,000 percentage. But the reality is there's a breakdown in that. And so some people, as has been pointed out in Oakland and some other places, is that elderly are far more likely to vote for one person on the ballot. And if you do that, and your ballot is exhausted because the candidate is eliminated, that means it's exhausted. If you vote for, let's say hypothetically, you accidentally vote for the same person twice. You rank them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 1, 2, 3, or whatever. Point is, the ballot gets exhausted. Oh, in Oakland, they also have an issue with the ballot, kind of looking like a 5-star survey. And so think of an elderly lady or someone else, a minority, someone that doesn't speak English, as a primary language. So you look at these people and you're like, I'm sure they'll get it, no problem, right? Well, the reality is they don't. We found that Pacific Islanders and Latinos are far more likely to vote for just one candidate as well. So elderly Pacific Islanders and Latinos are all being hurt by the system. And it's just because of the ballot complexity. So that was my whole thing. That's the primary reason for my presentation, is I want people to know that there are people hurt by the system. It actually does hurt people. Because if you go down, like I said, as my grandfather went, voted in every election his entire life. He goes down and votes. He thinks everything's fine. But the reality is his vote was tossed. And he has no idea. No one ever tells him anything. And so that's a big concern. And the fact that various demographic groups, including elderly and Pacific Islanders and Latinos and a lot of other groups, in Oakland, they found that there was like a very clear image of the poor non-white had far more exhausted ballots and far more voting errors than the white rich areas of Oakland. And this is data that's proven based upon the voter roll and the data that I've been able to get out of Oakland's election system. And so Oakland and San Francisco have ranked choice. They've been using it. And as I said before, we've all seen where that's gone. So moving on, and the other one is the third party. That's a really important one. They claim this is great for third parties. There's absolutely no evidence at all in the United States that anyone has ever won as a third party candidate with ranked choice. And the only Republican that's ever won with ranked choice is Lisa Murkowski. And she's not really a Republican by most people's standards.
No.
So just to kick things off, make it a little fun, this is a video this was actually the first video I ever made about ranked choice. And it was because the Ranked Choice Fair Vote group and Alaska, all these, they're little subsidies. They're not really local grassroots groups. And so in Alaska, they call it Alaskans for Better Elections. And in Arizona, they're called Arizona Voter Choice. And in Missouri, they're called Missouri for Better Elections. But they're all Fair Vote affiliates. And you can actually go to their website, Fair Vote's website, and find allies. So you just type in Fair Vote allies, and they have a whole breakdown by state of every single group. They have tons of them. And each one of these groups, and so in Alaska, the group that brought ranked choice to Alaska was funded by 99% out-of-state money. They brought $7 million from out of state. All their signature gatherers to do the Citizens Initiative were all from out of state. They flew people and they spent $300,000 to bring people to Alaska to get signatures. Well, remember, I'm the one that wrote the repeal of ranked choice. I didn't spend a dime on any signature gatherers. We have 700 or 800 of them. They're all volunteers. They're all Alaskans. So we didn't need to do that. You know why? Because Alaskans didn't want ranked choice voting. And I assure you, you don't either.
What flavors would you like?
Chocolate, blueberry, strawberry, Rocky Road.
Okay, well, based on our new system of selecting ice cream, we tabulate your state's choices into a very simple system that takes weeks longer to tabulate. And even though Alaska has a smaller population than most major cities, Alaska was the last in the country for election results. Based on this new system that is great with no flaws, is that you all get pistachio. Ranked choice voting is anything but simple. Do you know in 2022, the first year of using ranked choice voting, Alaska had the lowest voter turnout in history?
And so the pistachio is meant to represent Mary Peltola. It's not her as a person, it's just the fact that in that election, in the US House election, 60% of the state of Alaska voted for a Republican, and we have a Democrat in office. So I'm not really sure how you explain that without using ranked choice voting. That's the only way. And when I tell people across all the country, I say, you know, Alaska is the figurehead of everything that can go wrong with ranked choice. A lot of the things that they claim, they said, oh no, this is great. A lot of those issues never came out until Alaska. So, and they had lots of them, a lot. And so we'll cover a lot of those. One of those in particular was, so talked about Sarah Palin's election, well, Lisa Murkowski's election. So in that, you got to remember that how this process works with ranked choice. They have a jungle primary, not an open primary, called a jungle primary. Open primary and jungle primary are two different things. In Alaska, the ranked choice people like to sell it as open primary, the name open primary. It's not an open primary. Open primary means essentially that a Republican or a Democrat can vote in whatever primary they want. And so there's no restriction. A jungle primary means that all the people that are on the ballot are very similar to the California. So if you're familiar with Gavin Newsom's recall, okay. So in a lot of the elections they'll have like 50 candidates. And so in Alaska, we had, I don't remember how many, a lot of candidates. And that's the jungle primary. And so you, as a Republican Party and members of the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, would not be able to control who put an R or a D next to their name. So anyone could run as a Republican. Anyone could run as a Democrat. So with that, we go through that process, and Lisa, so there's 4 people that are on her election. And so there's 1 Democrat and 2 Republicans. And so in the final, we found that from the primary, so in the primary, you vote for just one person. So there's 50 candidates, you vote for just one. And that's all you get, just one vote for one person. And so the top 4, whoever gets the most votes, goes to the ranked choice general. And so there's lots of different versions. There's like top 5 or top 4, or top 6 or top 2. That's the same process. So it's all the same. It doesn't change. And so IRB, STB, RCB, this is all the same. So if you ever hear anyone ever try to explain it differently, then they're trying to trick you. But the point is like they get 1 vote, move on to the next, go to the general. And that, what we found was that Democrats decided they didn't want to vote for the Democrat in the general all of a sudden. So in 2020, nearly 44% of the state of Alaska voted for a Democrat in the US Senate election. And only 10% voted for a Democrat in 2022. So 30% of Democrats all of a sudden decided to change their vote from voting for a Democrat to voting for a Republican. I wonder why. Well, further examination finds that the Democrat did not have a very good likelihood to win. And so what the Democrats decided to do was to block a Trump appointed person. Her name is Kelly Tobacco. She actually won in the first round of voting. She had a higher percentage than Lisa Murkowski. But because of these votes from the Democrats, they pushed Lisa over the top through the second and third round of ranked choice and allowed Lisa to walk away with the win. So you had Democrats that were actively switching their vote, and not by a small margin, but 30% of Democrat voters switched their vote to voting for a Republican just to block Kelly from winning. So that is the way. That's called gaming. That's gaming. I don't care what anyone says. That's gaming. You cannot set an election system up that allows that kind of manipulation, because that means you vote honestly, right? That person that they did not vote honestly. They chose to vote for a Republican for the first time in their whole life. So that did happen, and it's very, very concerning.
Elections. There are outside interests that are impacting our elections. You've seen the TV ads, radio ads, and mailers telling us all that ranked choice voting is simple. Hearing these ads, I am reminded of a quote by Mark Twain. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. Mark Twain. We all know that ranked choice is bad for Alaska. Please see these 2 quick animations to show why. Lisa selects multiple candidates. Her choices were eliminated. Lisa's ballot gets exhausted. Ranked choice hurts Alaska. Candidates who lost the first round can still win. Results took weeks to tabulate. We were last in the country for election results. Ranked choice has multiple rounds of voting, which is confusing to many Alaskans.
We're through a couple of these.
Alaska estimated that it was going to spend $150,000 on ballot measure 2, aka ranked choice voting education. In fact, they spent $3.1 million on just voter education. How many private businesses get away with spending millions over the estimated cost? Ranked choice voting groups nationally claim that ranked choice voting is a cheaper alternative to traditional elections. Considering that this is just what the state of Alaska spent on ballot measure 2, aka ranked choice voting, the $3.1 million spent on voter education is on top of the $7 million pro-RCV groups spent on advertising, signature gathering, and propaganda. Out of the $7 million spent, only $20,000 was raised for Alaskans, according to multiple news sources.
$7 million, and only 20 grand came from Alaska. So the voter education thing, I told you I was going to bring that up. That's a 20 times increase. And that's state money. That's not out-of-state money. That was state of Alaska money. And they claimed on paper, when they did their initial ballot initiative, it claimed that the state was only going to spend $150,000 on voter education. And they ended up spending $3.1 million just on voter education. That's not including any additional cost whatsoever with ranked choice. That's just the education piece. And we aren't alone. In New York, they spent $15 million on voter education for ranked choice voting. So they say it's faster, they say it's cheaper. It's not cheaper, not by any stretch.
Voting brought more electronic voting machines to Alaska. We would like to quote the state documentation regarding ballot measure 2, aka ranked choice voting. Ballot tabulation equipment. In order to accommodate ranked choice voting, the division would need to purchase 137 ballot tabulators for precincts that currently hand count ballots. Ranked choice voting is not allowed for the hand counting of ballots. All ballots must first be scanned and counted by a tabulator for the tabulation grid to be captured. Estimated cost $534,300. Yet even though Alaskans spend $500,000 on electronic voting machines, we were the last in the country for election result.
Embarrassing. And you look at these voting machines, and it's not just like, okay, well, it's fine, we all use voting machines. Like, no, actually, we don't have to necessarily, especially in a place like Alaska. It's like some places like there's like 100 people. It's true. I've been there. So, but the reality is like when you get into the costs and you get into these underlying methods of like trying to figure out why we would do this, why would Alaska do this, you realize most of it comes from that out-of-state money. That's the only way it makes any sense. And the other thing too is that on our ballot initiative, they said that they were going to eliminate dark money from Alaska. And it was funded by 99% dark money. It's funny, but fortunately it has really bad ramifications for us in Alaska. And I can tell you there's a lot of people that are very, very upset with what's happened and where we're at. Mary seems like a very nice lady. Unfortunately, her husband just passed in a plane accident yesterday. So I don't want to say anything negative about her, but I will say I don't believe that she represents Alaska very well. And I believe there's a lot of people in Alaska feel the same way that I do. And we want to feel represented. We only get one U.S. House representative in Alaska. And she's our sole and only representative. And that seat, prior to her getting that seat, remember, she didn't get 60% of the vote. She got less than that. Somehow she won anyway. But Don Young held that seat for 50 years as a Republican prior to her winning. So it was a major win for the Democrats. Major win. But the facts are the Alaskans are not happy.
Product of millions of dollars from non-Alaskan dark money advertisements, which were spoon-fed to Alaskans by a barrage of ads before the election. Dennis and Dorothy Smith, March 5th, 2023, Anchorage Daily News, letter to the editor.
I didn't write that. So again, they claim it's better, they claim it's cheaper, they claim it's faster, they claim it increases turnout, they claim it provides an absolute majority, they say it's good for third parties, they claim it's more civil, and they claim it reduces and eliminates spoiler candidates. And there's no proof. Zero proof. They'll claim whatever that makes sense to them. But the one on the civil part, there was actually an MIT study done about Maine's election and found that it was not more civil. It was less civil. And they spent a lot more money in negative advertising. And I would also agree, being someone that was involved, there in Alaska, you had Republicans attacking Republicans past the primary all the way up to the general, which would never happen in a traditional election because all of the Republicans would get behind one candidate in the primary and then they would move on. But it's not just Republicans attacking Republicans, that's just an example of Alaska. But in other areas that use ranked choice, you have this issue as well for Democrats. They're going to attack the other Democrats, etc. So it's not more civil, regardless of what they claim.
2020 RCV initiative, known as Ballot Measure 2, was sold to Alaskans as an effort to keep outside dark money from influencing the state's elections. It was out-of-state funding that helped push the initiative over the finish line. According to an October 2020 report by Breitbart News, for instance, Yes on 2 for Better Elections, a pro-RCV group, raised more funds from outside Alaska, $6,194,081, than from within the state, $20,000. Sean Fleetwood, The Federalist, February 14th, 2023.
Another thing about my work and everyone else's work is that I source everything I do. And so in my book, I have over 100 different sources to prove. And if you go to any Fair Vote or any of the pro-ranked choice groups, you will not find any sources. And if they are sources, what we call them, what we now call them nowadays, if they're Republicans, they're called Soros Republicans. And if Democrats, they're just normally Democrats. But Soros Republicans is a good name. It really is. And that really is a good explanation. Like you had some Republicans that did vote here in Hawaii for ranked choice. And so now you want to find out why. Why would Republicans vote for something that the RNC is against, that Kevin McCarthy, who's Speaker of the House, is against, and a lot of other Republicans are very much against. So why would they vote for it? Why would that be in Alaska we found that the majority of the Republicans that do vote or support ranked choice are closely tied to Lisa Murkowski, very closely. So that is a very clear example. And I did find there's a lady named Catherine Gell, who she was a heiress of a dairy company. So her family had owned a dairy company in Wisconsin for 125 years. And she took it over and she sold it. And then she's been using that money to influence people's elections. And I actually got a chance to speak to her via Zoom. And I started off by a Twitter conversation. I had asked her if she'd be willing to debate me. And she said originally she would. I actually have personally debated the pro-ranked choice group in Alaska, absolutely demolished them. They had no basis of their argument. They claimed that if ranked choice voting goes away, that the religious right would ruin the state and all this craziness. Like that was their argument. But they when you go to the data, say, where did the money come from? Did this increase turnout? Did it help anybody? Did it give us the results we really wanted? Any of these things? No, they didn't talk any of that. For me, I had all this same exact arguments. Actually, it was an earlier version. It wasn't nearly as detailed. But the point was, like, they didn't have any basis of like why they wanted to keep ranked choice. They had no data, they had no backing, they had nothing. All they had was just hyperbole of people's opinion and his opinion.
Why did Alaska have such low voter turnout in 2022? Ballot Measure 2, or ranked choice voting, was sold to us as a tool to increase voter turnout, which did not take place. The voter turnout was a miserable 44% in November. That is lower than every election in Alaska since 1976, which is as far back as the results go. Throughout the United States, most states have the highest election turnout. And had the lowest voter turnout in Alaska's recorded history. Why? Ranked choice voting seems to have suppressed the vote. Confused voters and voters who were exhausted by the never-ending campaign cycle were all disenfranchised. Alaska was also the last state in the country for regular election results. A Democrat received the lowest percentage of the vote in a U.S. Senate election in Alaska's history. Questions. Why was the election turnout the lowest in state history by percentage? What was the total state of Alaska money spent on the implementation and education expenses associated with ranked choice voting? Does Mat-Su hand count or use electronic voting tabulators in future elections? So many questions and very little answers. Our elections should be easy to understand. Voters should not be confused on how to fill out their ballots. Our older voters and new voters were hurt by ranked choice voting.
There's a lot in that one. Okay, there's a couple of pieces that I definitely want to talk a little bit about, but I also want to kind of burn through some of these videos. So I'm going to go ahead and get through a couple more, and then I'll cover a little bit more on some of the pieces that we talk about.
Voting claims that it is good for third-party candidates. In the 2020 U.S. Senate election that Dan Sullivan won, there were 5 third-party candidates. In the 2022 U.S. Senate election, using the top 4 ranked choice voting system, there were 0 third-party candidates. Obviously, ranked choice voting is not good for third-party candidates. In fact, ranked choice voting, since it is a top 4 RCV system, we have more than 4 political parties. So ranked choice voting does away with all third-party representation for voters.
Yeah, pretty scary. Going from 5 third-party candidates to 0 in 2 years. And earlier I mentioned that the Democrat received the lowest percentage of the vote in a U.S. Senate election in Alaska's history. That was that 30% shift that happened last year. So in 2022 or 2020, there was 44% that voted for a Democrat in the U.S. Senate election. And in 2020, there was only 10% that voted for a Democrat. So yes, Mary won, but then on the other side of the race, the Democrat literally got the lowest percentage of the vote in history of the state. Why would we be celebrating that? For anybody, even us in this room as Republicans, we don't want to celebrate that. We want to know why. Why, if they all voted for Republican, awesome. But why? Why did you change your vote all of a sudden? Like, I'm happy you guys voted for Republican, I guess, but I'm still kind of curious, why would you shift your vote? And of course, you're never going to get an answer. because they know why they shifted their vote. They wanted to block Kelly from winning, and this was the only way to do that. And then again, if it was 5% or 10% or something small, it would be explainable. But this isn't explainable. It's 30%. It's a huge number. That's a massive percentage of voters. And then you have the fact that Alaska has not always been a Republican place. There have been many bluebird Democrats back in the day that have been successful winning elections there. So this isn't like new. Democrats aren't new to Alaska. So having 44%, we have legal weed in Alaska. So I'm saying we're relatively kind of progressive in some areas. And so 44% seems about right for the amount of people that live there. So if you look at a general based upon population, I would say about 44% would be about right. That's who would vote. If you look at Joe Biden's turnout, it's about 40%, 44%, somewhere in that range. Never over 50, but a strong minority. So if you look at the U.S. Senate election last year, you would never be able to predict at only 10% that voted for Democrats. So that's very, very worrisome for Democrats. And so earlier I mentioned that the DC Democrats blocked ranked choice voting and they sued the city to stop it. And it's not even a thing yet. They haven't even started a petition drive yet. And they're already starting to put their hammer down. And so they want to make sure that it doesn't take place. And this is one of the reasons why. It's because the elections can be manipulated in ways never before possible.
Election issues in 2022. Do you think it would have made a difference if Al Gross's name was on the ballot in the U.S. House race? The race went from 2 Republicans versus 2 Democrats to 2 Republicans versus 1 Democrat, allowing the possibility of splitting the Republican vote. The Division of Elections failed to strictly comply with election law deadlines. Alaska Supreme Court. On June 21, 2022, 56 days before the special general election and the regular primary election, Dr. Al Gross filed his withdrawal from both elections. At that time, preliminary special election results indicated that Dr. Gross had the 3rd most votes in the special primary election, followed by Mary Peltola with the 4th most votes and Tara Sweeney the 5th most votes. Though the parties did not raise the issue of Dr. Gross's name being removed from the special general election ballot, we are troubled by the division's apparent failure to abide by the statute and its own regulations in this regard. Under our interpretation of AS 15.25.100, unless a candidate withdraws after the primary election and 64 more days before the general election, the division shall place on the general election ballot only the names of the 4 candidates receiving the greatest number of votes for an office. This language makes clear that, had the division strictly followed the law, Dr. Gross's name should have remained on the special general election ballot. Similar under 6 AAC 25.210B. The 64-day replacement deadline applies to removing a withdrawn candidate's name from the general election ballot. Abiding by this regulation would have required the division to leave Dr. Gross's name on the ballot. Alaska Supreme Court, April 28, 2023. Al Gross should have stayed on the U.S. House ballot, Alaska Supreme Court says. By James Brooks, Alaska Beacon, updated April 29, 2023.
Do you know that in multiple races?
So when you look at that, it's incredibly concerning. One, that the Division of Elections didn't abide by the very law that's written. And also, why didn't they abide by that law? So we're just now getting to the fact that the Supreme Court, who's actually relatively liberal in Alaska, that made the determination that the division violated state law when they removed Al Gross's name. I want to explain how this could have an impact. You have 4 candidates, 2 are Democrat, 2 are Republican. Al Gross is in 3rd place. Al Gross's name stays on the ballot, regardless if he drops out or not. Mary is now in 4th. She was in 4th at the very beginning, and for the first special. She probably would have stayed in that realm in the next election. And if that happened, and Al Gross was still in 3rd, and everyone he got a higher percentage than Mary Peltola would be eliminated. And in that, now you have Al Gross going against Sarah Palin and Nick Begich. I mean, Sarah Palin or Nick Begich is most likely going to walk away with the win. And that would change everything. So you're talking about the division not abiding by state law actually did have an impact on our outcome and who actually is our U.S. House representative member. So this is April, this year, so come on guys, like why didn't you do this last year? Why, you like at the time whenever he dropped his name, why didn't anybody say anything? Why did the, and if you go ask the division, they won't answer your questions. So it's like in the media, surprisingly, this is a relative, like I think we have maybe one or two conservative media outlets in Alaska. They're both local. All the big name media are all liberals. So for them to admit the division violated state law when they removed his name is very, very concerning. And you have a liberal court that made that determination. So, yeah, that's the potential gaming that we talked about in regards to the percentage of the vote from the Dems being shifted to the Lisa Murkowski. So right there, Democrat received 41.2% of the vote in 2020. In 2022, it decreased dramatically to 10.7%. And that's the general election, not the primary, but the general. So one of the things that, back if you look at the little thing where it said no proof, it talks about spoiler candidates. And so when you talk about spoilers, Ranked Choice claims that they eliminate spoilers. There's no chance to get a spoiler. Well, either Begich or Palin were spoilers last year. And so that's proof in the data. It shows that, in my opinion, I love Palin. She's a great lady, super sweet. I know her very well. We live in the same city and I've helped her with a lot of things, and she's been very helpful with repealing Ranked Choice. And Begich and Sarah have both signed our repeal to repeal it from the state. So, but I believe Sarah Palin was the spoiler candidate based upon the math. And so if Sarah was running by herself against Mary, who knows what would have happened. If Begich was running against Mary just by himself, he, by the numbers, would have won. And so Sarah pulled votes from him that ultimately, and his voters didn't vote for her as a second. And I've met a lot of conservatives even today, even after our horrible losses last year, not just in the federal, we lost our House seat after 50 years to a Dem. And then the legislature also started to turn more blue because of Ranked Choice too. So, you would think conservatives would be like, oh yeah, I got this. We're not gonna make the same mistakes this next round. Actually, they're all gonna make the same mistakes again. I post regularly. I posted once I got to Hawaii, I actually made a post. I encouraged everyone to, I'm not telling you how to vote, but I am encouraging you to rank your candidates, because if you don't, you have a risk of having your ballot exhausted. And I'm telling you, even people that are still live there, have been active and signed the petition to repeal, still don't even understand what exhausted ballots are. So if you think this is complex, like our conversation today, it is. And there's a reason it's complex. It's meant to disenfranchise people. It's meant to make it where you don't want to be involved in your politics anymore, because it doesn't matter. Your voice doesn't matter anymore. 60% of the state voted for Republican, and we got a Democrat. So why would you think your voice matters at all? Here's the transfer right there. It talks about tactical votes. And like I said, very heavily sourced material, lots of research papers. And this actually proves that Sarah Palin was a spoiler candidate, unfortunately. And so that, again, they said it doesn't have spoilers. Well, there's proof, mathematical proof, that there are spoiler candidates in Ranked Choice. There is not a single piece of shred of evidence out there outside of my presentation and my research that proves this, though. Because there's not that many anti-RCV groups. Ranked choice voting is not new, but the heavy-handed promotion of it is new. That just started over the last 10 or 15 years in various cities and communities. And so I have a couple examples, and we'll go over those, but one of them in particular is Aspen, Colorado. I'm watching the time up there. I don't know if you have anything extra after, okay. So, but Aspen, Colorado, they have, they got it after one election, and they repealed it. So 70% of the city voted for Ranked Choice. After one election, they repealed it. And they had 84 times the ballot errors that they normally have. 84 times in a tiny little city. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, there's that again. So I love putting that up there because like this is legitimately, if you go look up every ranked choice group in this country, they all claim these things. And like, again, if you ask them, show me the proof, give me the data, you'll never see it. They'll give you a Fair Vote article. They'll give you an article that goes back to Fair Vote. They're like, oh no, like, trust us. We're the ones promoting and paying millions of dollars to do ranked choice everywhere, but hey, trust us. And so this is my claim. I claim it hurts a lot of people. It hurts our English second language voters. It hurts our elderly voters. It hurts our disabled voters. It hurts our low information voters. It hurts our low education voters. It hurts our low income voters. It hurts our third parties, our third party candidates, third party voters. Republicans, libertarians, independents, conservatives, and moderate Democrats are all hurt by ranked choice voting.
Leaders around our country have to say about ranked choice voting. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy trashed the system, ranked choice voting, during a podcast appearance with Donald Trump Jr. Someone can get the most votes and not win, said McCarthy. So if you come in third, you win. What? I got a lot of second votes. I got a lot of third vote. What does that mean? Kevin McCarthy, Speaker, U.S. House of Representatives, Business Insider, March 2023. Ranked choice voting is a scam to rig elections. 60% of Alaskan voters voted for a Republican, but thanks to a convoluted process and ballot exhaustion, which disenfranchises voters, Democrat won. U.S. Senator Tom Cotton, Business Insider, March 2023. Ranked choice voting, is voter suppression. I hope that the courts see that ranked choice voting is not right for democracy. NAACP's Hazel Dukes, Stop RCV, March 2023. 95% of the people talking to me about our new ranked choice voting system were saying how utterly confusing it was. U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan, Stop RCV, February 2023.
NAACP. Multiple NAACP groups have come out against ranked choice. In Oakland, there was a major issue this last election in 2022, and we'll cover that a little bit. But in that election, it was a school board mayor election. Very, very concerning. In that election, they ran the tabulation wrong, the election office did. And so because of the ranking, they were supposed to, if people skip rankings, they're supposed to still count the skip as if they weren't there at all. And the way they tabulated was that vote got tossed. And so Fair Vote, who is a pro-ranked choice group, intervened in that election. And the person that actually won the election was a Fair Vote candidate, a favorite Fair Vote candidate, but the person that originally won was not. And so why would you think Fair Vote would have intervened if the results were different? And so how is some just out-of-state third-party group intervening in an election and telling the city, hey, you guys did this wrong, and then they reran the tabulation, found that the school board member didn't actually win based upon the new tabulation grid, and it took 6 months through court to determine who actually won, and then finally appoint that person. And this just happened. And Oakland's been, wait. One of the things about ranked choice is they claim that it gets better over time. They said everyone gets it later. Right now, it's okay, not everyone understands it. But later, 10 years, 20 years, Oakland's been using it for a really long time. So why are they having issues like the election office doesn't know how it works? I showed you earlier that the Division of Elections Alaska made mistakes too. So we have two different division of elections in two different states making massive mistakes that have huge ramifications to who actually won the election. And it's all because of ranked choice voting. And if we just eliminate ranked choice voting, go back to one person, one vote, all those problems go away.
The 3 Liberal governors have come out against ranked choice voting. In California, Governor Gavin Newsom vetoed ranked choice voting. I don't want to overly complicate that process to such an extent that people start to wonder, what is it that is actually going on here? Governor Charlie Baker, Massachusetts governor. Ranked choice voting is overly complicated and confusing. I believe it deprives voters of genuinely informed choice. Former California Governor Jerry Brown. Ranked choice is an experiment that has been tried in several charter cities in California. where it has been implemented, I am concerned that it has often led to voter confusion and that the promise that ranked choice voting leads to greater democracy is not necessarily fulfilled. The state would benefit from learning more from charter cities who use ranked choice voting before broadly expanding the system. Governor Gavin Newsom.
Wow. Tell me, when I saw that, like, he signed that veto and everything. That's huge. I hate Gavin Newsom, but I love the fact that he hates ranked choice voting, and I use that a lot. And I tell people, so now you have multiple Democrat governors and the DC Democrats that have sued the block ranked choice. So you can't have Democrat legislators in Hawaii tell you that Democrats support ranked choice. You have multiple examples of that not being true. And so I hope you take, and I will make sure that you guys have this slideshow and all this data, and all yours. You can share it. You can do whatever you want with no copyrights. You can reuse it, take the videos, download them, do anything you want with them. Share them with your legislators. Let them know the truth behind ranked choice. It's really important.
Voting in the 2011 San Francisco municipal election final report. Corey Cook, PhD, and David Latterman, MS, MPP, University of San Francisco. The report analyzes the usage of ranked choice voting in the 2011 San Francisco municipal election. The study examines voters' tendencies to overvote, undervote, and rank candidates for 3 citywide offices: sheriff, district attorney, and mayor. What did the report find? Precincts with higher proportions of Asian and Pacific Islander, Latino, and older voters were disproportionately likely to make mistakes on the ballot, and more progressive precincts, as measured by the Progressive Voter Index, were also more likely to have ballots containing overvotes. Precincts with higher concentrations of older voters, moderate voters, Latino, and Asian and Pacific Islander voters were more likely to vote for only one candidate rather than ranking up to 3 allowable preferences. Other wrong ways to vote using ranked choice voting. A. Overvotes. The voter gave multiple candidates the same rank. B. Duplicates. The voter ranked the same candidate multiple times. C. Skipped ranks. The voter left gaps in their ranking. Over 10 years later in Oakland in 2022, ranked choice voting was plagued with tabulation errors that took nearly 6 months for the actual winner to be appointed.
So 10 years later, still having the same issues. And the same, Oakland and San Francisco are pretty much the same place. So I mean, like, when you look at the spacing and everything. So like, very, very concerning that we would have those type of issues 10 years later. And what you'll find out here shortly is that the demographic disparity between ballots being exhausted and ballot errors is still continuing today, even with, so that means that, like I said earlier, people that in San Francisco, people that were Latino, Pacific Islander, elderly, were far more likely to have ballot errors and also select one person, which ultimately hurts you as a voter if you do that in ranked choice. And then in Oakland, just recently, same issue, 2022, found in the data that a large percentage of people that were non-white, poor, far more likely to have ballot errors and far more likely to have exhausted ballots. And the scary thing is, upwards of 20% in some districts, in the poorer districts, upwards of 20% were exhausted. And so that was incredibly concerning. That was the highest I've ever heard or ever seen out of exhausted ballots. But of course, they don't show that number. They do an average. And so they include the rich white number in there as well. And when you look at that average, it's not 20%, it's lower. But when you break it down, you start looking at those individual areas and you're like, okay, well, here's the rich part of Oakland, here's the poorer part of Oakland, and you find that the poorer part of Oakland has more ballot errors and more issues with voting than you do in the richer part of Oakland. So,
Colorado, 2009. There were significant problems with how instant runoff voting, a type of ranked choice voting, worked. People were confused by the process, the ballots, and the tabulation. We originally voted 70% to get instant runoff voting. After one election, they voted 65% to go back to the plurality voting method. Today, Aspen uses plurality voting for their elections. Why did they vote to repeal instant runoff voting? Local news. Janet Urquhart, The Aspen Times, May 6, 2009. Aspen chose a mayor and 2 city council members Tuesday in an election that left plenty of voters confused at the polls and equally mystified as the ballots were tallied in televised proceedings late into the evening. Voters apparently found the runoff ballots, which asked them to rank the 4 mayoral candidates and 9 council candidates in order of preference, confusing. There were 168 spoiled ballots Tuesday. 2 is typical, 84 times increase in spoiled ballots, said City Clerk Catherine Koch.
Aaron Hedge, The Aspen Times, November 3rd, 2010. Our traditional runoff system really gives us a chance to get to know our candidates better. Marilyn Marks. Referendum 2B asked Aspen residents if they wanted to reinstate the voting method the city used prior to instant runoff, or IRV, and they said yes. Of the 2,534 voters who weighed in on the issue, 1,654, or 65.3%, said IRV should go, while 880, or 34.7% of voters, said they wanted to keep it. IRV was approved by Aspen voters in November 2007 after a campaign for the method established it as one that would save the government money by not requiring the expensive runoff while still achieving a true majority for the winning candidate. But critics have said the method is flawed because they say it is more prone to non-monotonicity, a mathematical phenomenon that can cause a candidate who received fewer votes than other candidates to win.
Like Mary Peltola.
Ranked choice voting in Maine by Jesse Clark, 3/18/2021, MIT Election Lab. RCV's impact on campaigns. The study examined the impact of ranked choice voting, RCV, on campaigns and civility. One claim by RCV reformers is that it promotes more civil campaigns by encouraging candidates to seek second-place votes from supporters of other candidates. However, the study's analysis showed that negative spending on campaigns in Maine actually increased significantly after implementing RCV, suggesting that RCV does not necessarily make campaigns more civil. The study also analyzed Facebook advertisements, mentioning congressional candidates in Maine during the first year of RCV implementation, and found the 2018 campaign was even more negative compared to similar districts in other states. Jesse Clark graduated with a PhD in political science from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology.
Lots of sources. That's what I'm saying. None of these people are just some like Joe Schmo people either. They're not paid Fairvote people. If you go to Fairvote's website, every article and everything they do are some way, shape, or form paid for consultants. So it doesn't help get a clear picture of the true nature of ranked choice voting.
Ranked choice primary in New York City experienced a high rate of exhausted primary ballots, where nearly 15% of certified ballots did not select the top 2 candidates, Eric Adams or Catherine Garcia, rendering them inactive. This higher rate of exhausted ballots raised questions about the system's effectiveness. In the New York City primary, out of over 942,000 certified ballots cast, 140,202 voters, 15%, did not select either Eric Adams or Catherine Garcia as part of the ranking, making their ballots inactive. Exhausted. In another instance, an entire county in the San Francisco Bay Area announced the wrong winner in a race that used ranked choice voting, leading to a recount of all elections that utilize the system. Additionally, vote trashing has been observed with thousands of ballots discarded in races in Maine and Alaska, and a significant number of exhausted ballots in a San Francisco election. Critics argue that popular candidates often lose under ranked choice voting, as candidates with higher initial vote percentages have been ultimately defeated, raising concerns about fairness, reliability, and accuracy. Governor Gavin Newsom of California and former
Skip that one. So it's covering a little bit of the same thing. But so in that, when you look at the numbers there, it's very concerning. It's really worrisome because like you're seeing the same thing playing out in city after city, in place after place, and everywhere that's instituted a ranked choice has some type of problem with it. We had court cases in Alaska, we had court cases in Oakland. This isn't old, these are new, these are both in 2020, 2022. Just like anywhere ranked choice voting comes, you got like challenges, court challenges, you got money being spent. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. And we go straight to the one person, one vote. Again, don't have that issue. That one, Oakland, we'll cover that. I'm going to DC, a little bit of time left. And I'll do Q&A.
DC, May 31, 2023. The DC Democratic Party has concluded that ranked choice voting, RCV, is not in the best interest of voters and candidates in the District of Columbia. After an extensive 8-month discussion and careful deliberation, the party has reached this decision, taking into account the unique characteristics of the district and the potential impact of RCV on the electoral system. We've identified significant concerns that prevent us from endorsing this approach, stated the party. One of the fundamental issues highlighted is the unequal voter turnout across district wards, which RCV would not adequately address and could potentially undermine democratic principles. Undervoting, a significant challenge faced by the district, would also be worsened by the adoption of ranked choice voting. The party's priority is to ensure that every vote is counted accurately and that the voice of each voter is properly represented, without introducing complexities that hinder voter engagement and participation. The DC Democratic Party expressed wariness about the broader agenda associated with RCV, stating, "It was clear to us then that RCV is part of a broader agenda to erode the influence of the strong Democratic base in the district." They highlighted concerns about potential consequences, such as open primaries that could undermine the rights of registered Democrats to choose their nominee for public office. The party firmly believes in ensuring that every voter, regardless of party affiliation or independent status, has the right to freely choose their preferred candidate. They emphasize that the current electoral system in the district provides ample choices for voters to engage with the political process and participate in the general election without disenfranchising anyone. Through this comprehensive process, the DC Democratic Party has determined that RCV is not suitable for the District of Columbia, taking into consideration its unique circumstances and the potential consequences it may bring.
Yeah, pretty much everything I said. That's actually verbatim. I didn't, like some of these I write myself. The Alaska Supreme Court one was written, that's from the Supreme Court. So that video is verbatim Supreme Court verbiage, and I just copy and pasted it. And this one, same situation. This was these two pamphlets up here, those sheets, those directly from the DC Democrats. And then shortly after this, they filed a lawsuit to block it. For me, it hasn't even been a petition yet, and they're already blocking it.
Francisco, 2011. A study on the 2011.
We did that one already. So ESL voters, again, just covering the same things I already talked about, issues, these are my claims, ranked choice, that's what my book covers. And a heavy part of my book is about demographics. It's a heavy part about minorities. It's a heavy part about people that have a lower education or low information voters. Low information voters, they happen. People work. They work, they have a job. They just want to leave their job, go down and vote real quick and go back to their job. That's how it should be. Well, unfortunately, when you have 50 candidates in a primary, it makes it literally impossible to know everything about every one of those candidates. So whenever DC Democrats were talking about vetting candidates, that's what they're discussing. They're saying that the primary process allows people to vet candidates much better than you would be able to otherwise. If you're a political person, sure, you might be able to spend time to go through all 50 candidates. But if you're not, and you are a low information voter, and you want to actually have a life outside of politics, maybe you don't want to look at all 50 candidates. Maybe you want to trust the party to be able to determine who your candidate is that goes into the general. And remember, at the very beginning, I said, you do not, with a jungle primary, they say open, it's not open, it's jungle. Remember that. There's a difference. And it's important because the pro-ranked choice people nationally are calling it open primary, when in reality, it's a jungle primary. They're different things. And the reason why they do this is because the names matter. Marketing matters. And so when you look at IRV, that's what it was with Aspen, instant runoff voting, that became unpopular. And so they changed the name to ranked choice voting. And now that's become unpopular. So in Arizona, when I was there, they pulled the ballot initiative. So they originally were going to move forward with a signature drive in Arizona. And hopefully because of my work and other people's work, they pulled the petition, and they're not going to do it now. And the reasoning was from the consultant. He said that ranked choice voting does not poll well in Arizona, and that it's a term, and it's important. Oh, yep. That's another issue with it is that ranked choice voting. There's a couple different, like I said, the terms. They use different names, so they moved on from ranked choice voting. Now they're calling it approval voting. They're calling it freedom voting, and they're calling it star voting. And these are all different variations of the same system. They call it freedom voting specifically in Missouri. So in Missouri, and they're packaging it with other things too. So in Missouri, they packaged the ranked choice initiative, ballot initiative, citizens initiative. Spent I think $7 million in that one, and they packaged it with the cannabis to get legal weed. And they got the legal weed, but the ranked choice did not go through. So luckily, and they blew $7 million. They don't care. Don't care at all. They don't even blink. They just go right back at it. So this time they relabeled it and they call it freedom voting in Missouri. And they're sort of trying to get it under that name now. And they're like, oh, it's so much different than ranked choice. It's so much different. It's like, okay. What I like to call all of these systems, and for future people, I think I'm the first, I know I'm not probably the first person that's coined this term, but when you're looking at all of these different systems, a lot of people don't even know all of these systems exist. So when you're talking about it, I call it multiple choice voting. It's because you get multiple choices, and they're all that way. So they're all multiple choice voting, which means that you get multiple choices on your ballot and for each, and how I look at it is, and she explained it very well in her bill. And if you have one, in every one election, you should be able to only select one person per election, per election cycle per person. So every one voter only gets one vote per race. End of story. That's a really simple way to explain it. If you get multiple choices per race, now it's multiple choice voting, irregardless of what they call it.
There are only 2 states that use ranked choice voting, Maine and Alaska. This year, multiple states have banned ranked choice voting. 5 states have banned ranked choice voting. Florida, Tennessee, Idaho, South Dakota, and Montana have banned ranked choice voting. This is on top of states working on banning ranked choice voting. More ranked choice voting bans considered in 2023 legislative sessions than previous years.
By Joseph Grady, Ballotpedia News, April 10th, 2023 at 9:22 p.m. State legislatures are considering a similar number of bills related to ranked choice voting in 2023 sessions as they did last year, but the number of measures prohibiting or banning RCV has nearly doubled. Similar Republican-sponsored bills have passed at least one chamber of the legislature in their state so far in 2023. Arizona's HB 2552, Montana's HB 598, North Dakota's HB 1273, and Texas's SB 921. Elsewhere this year, Republican lawmakers in both Alaska and Maine, where ranked choice voting has been implemented for some federal and state-level elections through statewide ballot measures, have introduced legislation that will repeal their states' current use of the voting system.
Governor Gianforte signed HB 598, making Montana the 5th state in the nation to ban ranked choice voting. Who will be next?
We were heavily involved in Arizona, working on their HCR 2033, and that is a preempt ban of the primary, like making it where you cannot have open primary. And so that will be on the ballot next November because of Katie Hobbs. They can't get it passed directly. And then also Montana, we worked heavily with that group in Montana. And so we've been all over the country actively helping legislatures get bans put. And prior to last year, there were 0 bans. Now there's 5 and counting. So we're moving in the right direction, and I appreciate that. And that's actually the end of my presentation. So thank you all again for coming, and hope you got some great information.